Welcome to this reading of Red Wheelbarrow Writers' fourth anthology, Spring and All. Thanks to everyone for being here. Red Wheelbarrow Writers are a loose affiliation of writers working independently and coming together for support and celebration. On our website, redwheelbarrowwriters.com, you'll find information on our monthly happy hour and links to video interviews with some of the Spring and All authors. A big thanks to our publisher, Lisa Daly, and Sidekick Press for hosting this event. If you haven't already bought the book, there's a link in the chat. The chat is also where you can express your appreciation and leave comments for the readers. Just a reminder, authors, please unmute and turn on your videos after I call your name. Now let's welcome our first reader, Linda Lambert.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad you're here to listen to these good authors. In 1923, 100 years ago, William Carlos Williams' Spring and All was privately printed and published in Paris. 93 pages of quirky experimentation, upside-down headings, typographic irregularities, and untitled poems known only by their first lines, including The Red Wheelbarrow, and By the Contagious Hospital, the poem Laura Kalpakian suggested as a theme of hope and uplift for our fourth anthology. Like me, you may have wondered about a contagious hospital as an optimistic springboard. So many negative images in the poem: mottled clouds, muddy fields, dead brown weeds. Bleak, I thought. But at the 14th line, Williams described a new season. Dazed spring approaches. Now comes grass. Tomorrow, the stiff curl of wild carrot leaf. At that last phrase, I fell in love with the poem. I had never looked at the stiff curl of wild carrot leaf. A beautiful description. Nor thought about the roots he next described. They grip down and begin to awaken. Kind of like us after COVID. Now I could write something uplifting after I learned a little more about Williams. At Western's library, I found a thin 1998 paperback titled I Wanted to Write a Poem, reported and edited by Edith Heal, who was a student at Columbia University, who sat down with the poet and his wife at their home in New Jersey. He talked about all of his books, including Spring and All, which he called, I love this, a mixture of philosophy and nonsense. I left that book at the library, planning to check it out the next day. When I went back to the library, it had disappeared into some kind of library thin air. In Los Angeles a week later, a friend took me to a used bookstore, crowded with teetering stacks of overflow volumes. Tony, the owner, gave us a chatty orientation. Prices penciled on the title pages were only guidelines, so make me an offer. Anything by Williams? I asked. Check out the poetry section. He smiled and pointed. The poetry section had only one book by William Carlos Williams, a good, used copy of the book I'd found in the library. I wanted to write a poem. The penciled price, $11. Would he take $7.50? Sure, he said. Then I told him about the book's disappearance from the library's collection. The book found you, Tony said. It happens all the time around here. So now, this anthology has found you. I think you'll like it, and I think you'll enjoy the speakers who are about to share their stories and essays. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next up is Amanda Heath Stubbert.
For Alexis. That morning, our group of traveling writers had bounced our way out of Oaxaca proper to visit a local textile business still using traditional methods. We follow Alberto, our Oaxacan guide, in his signature crisp white shirt like goslings into the courtyard. Yesterday was a lot. We trooped around the pre-Columbian city Montalban in the blaring sun. Our German tour guide chastised us with spicy commands, though Brunhilde did relay a tidbit I continued to chew on. The city's inhabitants housed their dead in a crypt built into the corner of each family home, presumably serving as a daily reminder of who came before and upon whose shoulders you stood. Alberto ushers us toward an alcove for a demonstration. We choose from an eclectic set of chairs while my eye travels to the corner of the stone and brick structure, guessing at whether or not bones lie within. At our feet lies a color wheel of woolen yarn, behind each a bundle of thread with key ingredients for producing each hue. Daniel, our host, takes his seat at the center of this educational semicircle and begins. Alberto catches us up in English. He speaks of what dyes the yarn green, yellow, orange, and brown, all interesting, but not yet magic. I check the wall once more for signs of ancestors. Daniel's small son, Alexis, appears in a brown hoodie and extraordinarily long eyelashes with hot chocolate, handmade by the matriarch of the family.
Eddie. Yeah.
Next is the color red. Daniel holds a ping pong paddle cactus leaf covered in white specks, parasites. He plucks one mite from the green pad, then with a flourish of a Vegas illusionist, he brushes his left thumb across his right palm, and the white speck becomes a handful of brilliant red. We ooh and ah, we are converts, we say. We now see the magic. Something begins to shift. Do my fellow travelers feel the same change in the air? We beam to our hosts, hoping to convey our gratitude beyond the word gracias. This family opened their arms and let us in, sharing a perspective of connection with history and land we Westerners only read about. We've seen through new eyes, and we will not be the same. After lunch, we shuffle toward our van full in mind, body, and spirit, not quite ready to leave. Alexis tugs on his father's hand and asks a question which is related to Alberto and back. Alberto smiles. I explained to him that you are all writers. He wants to know if one of you will write about him and his family so they may become famous. As tears wet my eyes, I bend to meet Alexis face to face. Yes, I promise I will write about you and about our day with your family. As I climb into the van, I continue to mentally answer his question. Oh, Alexis, how could I keep from retelling our meeting? The picture of your family's deep roots in this land and each other burns within me like the embers of your clay oven. You have put the very earth beneath my feet and sunshine in my hands. Will I write about you? Not only that, I will keep the bones of your memory in the corner of my mind, always remembering your contribution to your culture and to my journey. Will I write about you? Yes, in these pages and within the walls of my heart.
Thank you, Amanda. Next up is Carla Schaefer.
I have two short poems. Spring, the doyen essence of 4 seasons, undefeated. Seed packets and catalogs, never far from reach. She comes to the window, raises the blinds, peers into the yard, damp and eager to bloom. Sentience fuses to rainwaters as it permeates soil. Emergent branch buds and crocus leaves surge. Her pulse, persistent from season to season until harvest, when the edible fragrance of spring caresses your hand. Psalm 100, illuminated for people living near the Salish Sea. Make the bark of the seal deep from your abdomen and feel vibrations of joy. Serve creation as if you are sunlight radiating from the wingtip of a soaring glaucous gull. Know your breath from its first intake and release, and remember all the ones ignored. Know each fiber of your body and the rhythm of your thoughts given only to you, freely and unconditionally. Enter into waters where salmon swim, in conversation with the spirit, from which all is made possible with praise and song. For you are blessed, and this bounteous life you receive unfolds, renewable as the seasons, in every seed and fruit, and in every drop of rain touching your skin.
Thank you, Carla. Next up is Dawn Quayle Landau.
Embracing an End is about my 10 years with hospice. I have a master's in social work and volunteer weekly at Bellingham Hospice House. Each week when I arrive at Hospice House, death is my bitch. My past has empowered me in this work. I will not be blindsided. I know that the people I care for will die. Maybe not today, but soon, regardless of whether I get attached to them or barely know them. However, I also know that I can give death a run for its money. I let families know that their loved ones are not made of paper. They can touch them and speak meaningful words in their ears. Recently, a patient's wife broke down. Clutching my hands and crying, she told me that she just wanted to wrap herself around her husband. He's the finest man I've ever known. He has made me feel special for nearly 30 years, she told me. Anne, you can hold him any way that makes you both happy. You can get into bed with him and wrap him up just the way you want to, I told her as we held hands and she cried. An hour later, when I came in to see if her husband John wanted anything, the two of them were entwined in the most loving knot in his bed. John smiled at me with tears in his eyes. Thank you so much for talking to my beautiful bride. I share the science of death with patients and their families. Hearing is the last thing to go, and many studies show that the brain keeps processing for 3 to 13 minutes after the heart stops. Think about that. It's astonishing to know that when our hearts stop, our brains may still be processing the last words we heard. I tell them that I believe even the most unresponsive patient is there with us. This is why I always touch them when I come in and tell them that I am here. I believe it matters so much what those last words are, and that we treat each person with dignity. It's inspirational beyond explanation to know that death doesn't have to be traumatic. It still is sometimes. People will continue to die traumatically like my father did. Young people will die too soon. Good marriages will be cut short. Bad marriages will be left unresolved. Spouses, parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts, uncles, and friends will struggle with the fact that death is a period we can't avoid at the end of countless sentences. But now I know so much more about how that can be re-examined and addressed. I don't fear death. I don't want to face it anytime soon, but I know I can look it in the eye and accept it. I feel hopeful that I will one day feel at peace with that moment in my life, that I'll say, I'm okay with this, I'm ready, and pass on to the next unknown phase peacefully. I've come to see it as a continuum. I feel joy and pride each week when I finish my shift in not minimizing this uniquely individual experience, in knowing I often help others feel less fearful or shaken by an event that society still broadly avoids and characterizes as negative. I feel uplifted in viewing my life more fully, more beautifully, through coming to terms with and embracing death.
Thanks, Dawn. Next up is Katie Fleshman.
Hello, thank you, Laura. This is my inspiration, my daughter, Leia. Driveway day. I have metastatic breast cancer. I am living with incurable cancer that is currently managed with medication. I'm still not sure how to say this out loud to fully portray the hugeness of it without sounding grim. Treatment has taken a toll on me, but I still have this life to live. I still have a daughter to raise and to show how to do this awful, hopeful, scary, beautiful thing we call life. When my daughter was small, I made a pact that we would get outside every day. Some days it's the short walk to the mailbox. Others it's a long hike in the woods or a bike ride by the marina. Today is a perfect driveway day. Early spring and the sun is out, but it isn't quite warm yet. I pull out a lawn chair, the old school kind with plastic woven webbing that gets looser and looser with each use, and I question whether today's the day I'm going to fall through. But it's bright pink and orange. Happy colors. Can I do chalk? My daughter calls from somewhere in the garage. Sure, I yell back as I push myself out of my happy chair for the third time since I got it out 10 minutes ago. I grab the half-empty tub of broken sidewalk chalk from the shelf and take it out to the driveway, then head back to my chair. My daughter's 4. I should know by now that I can't just sit and enjoy a sunny afternoon and get lost in my thoughts, but I sit down again as she starts to doodle. Mom, do you want to draw with me? No, my 40-year-old cancer-wrecked body doesn't want to crawl around on the concrete and draw a kitty or a bunny or a dog that all look the same because drawing is not something I am gifted at. Sure, what should I draw? Is what actually comes out of my mouth. As I push myself out of my chair yet again, my darling daughter scrunches up her face, thinking, let's make a world. Her face lights up as the brilliant idea comes to her. A whole world, huh? Okay, let's draw the world.
Thanks, Katie. Next is Kenneth Meyer.
Hi. Thanks. So this piece takes place at a luncheon near the Afghan border. And for this reading, I'll pick a different segment of it to read. So they're all having lunch. Granger sat down next to Blake, who was the public affairs officer. Said colleague was playing with some pilau. That's a rice dish. Granger, aren't you the writer? Most editors say no, he admitted. One of the translators read your story about the police stopping that van downtown. That was a fictional piece about someone speeding through a police check and the local police giving chase. They all wind up in the bazaar in the old town. The streets are so narrow there that the escaping van has to stop, and the driver gets out and starts running. The policeman chases the man, but he doesn't catch him. In the end, the policeman's lying on the ground by the wreckage of a display he crashed into. Blake continued, so my guy wants to translate that piece into Pashto and publish it in the magazine Sahar. Have you heard of Sahar? I have to warn you, it probably only has a circulation of about 300. Well, said Granger, that's 300 more readers than I have now. Tell him sure, it'd be great if they use it. I'll do that. 2 other colleagues were still discussing the business of the guard shooting somebody. That was the other reading I did. But Granger had had enough of that topic. At this point, with tribal feuds going on nearby, war in Afghanistan, and hostiles threatening the consulate on a daily basis, the bar for threatening event, unquote, was set high. Guards doing something and running off didn't count as hair raising. Unless a missile came flying in through the administration building window, everything was normal. Granger thought, what a crew. They had a certain esprit de corps. Most of them shared a certain set of psychological traits. They were unruffleable, pragmatic, focused, irrationally optimistic. We're standing by the tandoori morgue, said somebody. That's a chicken curry. Several colleagues laughed, some nervously, but most in genuine amusement. We're not leaving, said Granger. No, we're not, said Dean, who was the acting head of the mission. As he walked out the door, Granger pulled the paper out of his pocket with the poem and read it to himself. Barricaded compound in the twilight, frontier scouts under the trees, concrete barriers, and your 2 eyes on the roof. You check out a vehicle passing by. 2 men walk down the street. They're okay. In the daytime, the mountains look singed, but now they're only dark outlines. The private guards perform their sunset prayers. He took the paper and wrote at the bottom, and you perform a private prayer, a prayer for a night of crickets, cock-a-doodle-doo, and dripping water. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Next up is Laura Hine.
Climbing Half Dome. In the fall of 1970, while working in Yosemite National Park, The constant presence of Half Dome loomed large. At day's end, the pink glow of her tear-stained cheek beckoned, nudging me to enroll in Yosemite Mountaineering School. The instructor gathered our small group at the base of a slanting rock, at the toe of a towering cliff face. The 700-foot-high buttress was dwarfed by El Capitan. After the teacher was satisfied with our rope and harness skills, his assistant climbed the rock, showing us how to use hands and feet to move upward to a ledge. The day culminated in learning to rappel by looping rope in one hand around our hips. One by one, we stood at the tipping point where the rock turned vertical. Lean back, keep leaning, face the sky, the instructor urged. My toes left the edge when my heels dropped onto the cliff we had just ascended. Dangling parallel to the ground over 100 feet below, I pushed my feet away from the solid surface and allowed the rope to hold my weight. With each step, I gained confidence, pushed off, and bounced both feet. Like a moonwalker taking tentative and then giddier steps, I toyed with gravity's tug and bounded sideways down the cliff. In that moment, the territory available for me to explore unfurled. Previously, I could only gaze up. Now I could climb to places that had been out of my reach. The following summer, I met Anne-Marie. Like me, she preferred to avoid the proprietary attitude of male climbers who were willing to take a chick on a climb, but not without expecting favors afterward. Unlike me, Anne-Marie showed off her strength on the pull-up bar tied between two trees in the climbers' camp. For me, pull-ups were impossible. My strength was in legs, trained on 62 steps I ran up and down between my childhood home and the street. Anne-Marie floated the idea of climbing the imposing icon of Half Dome on a route called Snake Dike up the side facing Glacier Point. Although technically within our ability, the climb would be the longest and toughest challenge either of us had attempted. When word got out among climbers in Camp 4, they taunted us. Some of us will stay in camp to rescue you girls when the exposure freaks you out. Determined to prove them wrong, in early September, we hoisted frame packs laden with ropes, slings, carabiners, climbing shoes, and overnight gear, and hiked the trail past Vernal and Nevada Falls. We then struck out cross-country, uphill to the base of Half Dome, to camp overnight. The next morning, while the sun was hidden by the dome, we stowed our backpacks. I played the rope out to Anne-Marie as she started up. The rock face was steeper and higher than any I had climbed before. Was I really up to this ascent?
Thank you, Laura. Our next reader is Lorinda Boyer.
Show them love. The Dykes on Bikes, Seattle Pride's official leaders of the parade, throttle their motorcycle engines. Clad in leather, lycra, and in some cases nothing at all, they tear down the middle of the street. Sandy whistles and claps. I raise my hands up and attempt to catch pieces of multicolored confetti before it floats to the ground. Two individuals in decorated military uniforms march side by side. One carries the American flag, the other the Pride flag. I lay my right hand over my heart as I wonder why uniting us can't be as simple as this. A cherry red convertible carrying the mayor of Seattle rolls down the street at the heels of Seattle Rainbow City Marching Band. The band's members sway in choreographed motion to the music. Primary colored balloons, rainbow flags, feathers, and copious amounts of glitter adorn dancers, singers, marchers, and those simply caught up in the thrill of it all. 4th Street is transformed into an endless, most raucous musical. I've nearly forgotten the negative protesters until I hear, "Turn from your wickedness." The spewed words wet my exposed shoulder. I turn around as the men from the corner push their way between my wife and me. Our clasped hands are forced apart. Terror triggers my fight or flight response, and I freeze. Not careful where they step, whom they shove, or in whose ear they bellow, the men barge through the swarm of people lining the street curb. My heart pounds in my chest as I search for Sandy, who has seemingly disappeared. The roar of the crowd is loud, louder than the band of demonstrators, but their commotion catches the attention of the drag queen in the peacock blue dress. In one swift motion, she powers up the mic, presses it to her lips. "Uh-oh," she sing-songs. "Seems we have some angry fellas." She tisks, clucks, shakes her head. Parade goers maneuver about, craning their necks to locate the men she's referencing. I spot Sandy's head pop above the crowd. Then she vanishes. I wiggle my way through the bodies, hopeful I'm headed in my wife's direction. The men, undeterred by the Queen's acknowledgement, continue to rant with greater intensity. Being gay is not the way. God hates gays. They've managed to wrestle their way onto the street, filling a lull in parade activity. Disjointed in their approach, the men veer off in opposite directions, bellowing over the top of one another. The effect is chaotic, unpredictable. I hunch my shoulders, pull into myself as my feelings of vulnerability intensify. Sandy, my voice cracks. I'm close to tears when her face appears. I grab and squeeze tight to my wife's hand. Sandy squares her shoulders, pulls me closer. Her muscles tighten against me.
Thank you, Lorinda. Next up is Martha Oliver Smith.
Some context. My husband Steve and I drove across the country with our dog last fall. A hotel manager in Wyoming handed us a business card with the message, "Nothing is guaranteed." Crossing Nevada, we drove through miles of smoke from the mosquito fire burning in the Sierras. We stopped in Reno, where I once lived and taught decades ago. And I was wearing this striped scarf designed from a photo of Frank Lloyd Wright's colored pencils. Nothing is guaranteed. As we approach Reno around 6 p.m., I recognize nothing. Old streets are now freeway entrances and exit ramps that didn't exist when I lived here. The air is full of smoke, the streets already dark. None of the casino lights or street lights are working. We can't breathe with the windows open and can't see with them shut. Oncoming cars blind us. We can't stop and we don't know where we're going. Then I glimpse a small neon sign still alive on our right, a motel and a driveway. I yell, "Super 8!" Steve lurches into the barely visible entrance. The parking lot looks full, but we have to try. There's no going anywhere else. I wait in the car for a long time with the dog, making promises to the universe while Steve is trying to get a room. I think the wait is a good sign, though the card lurking in my purse insists nothing is guaranteed. The smoky air is so thick that I wrap my scarf loosely around my nose and mouth and consider our possible fate. I take nothing for granted. The universe provides a room. While I find it, Steve will park the car and walk the dog. I push a metal cart with our luggage into the lobby, mobbed with people pushing and shouting at each other. A man argues with the woman behind the desk. Others mill around, getting in line to shout at her. Then I remember COVID. I forgot my mask. No one is wearing one. Now I imagine the invisible virus spraying from the mouths of the angry shouters. I'm trying to move the cart, but I'm stuck in the narrow space between the front desk and a wall lined with slot machines. People stream around me, passing me in both directions. Head down, I try to push the cart forward, but I can't move. I escaped from the smoke outside, but inside the air is hot, thick, and dense. I'm dizzy and I start to panic. Where am I? Who am I? What am I doing here? I like your scarf. I look up to see a tall young girl, maybe 16, standing 2 feet in front of me, her face framed by dark hair, brown eyes, looking into mine. Pencils, the girl says. Yes, pencils, I agree. You're a teacher, she says. I look at her bright eyes full of intelligence and humor. I've never met her, but I know this girl. If she'd been my student, I would have recognized her as a kindred spirit, not a teacher-pleasing straight A student. There's humor and no bullshit in those eyes. We would have recognized each other. Yes, I'm a teacher. I mean, I was, I add, realizing that now I probably look like a lost old woman out of her depth. I'm retired. We smile. For me, something has shifted. A click, a switch.
Thank you, Martha. Our next reader is Michaela von Schweinitz.
We lost everything in Barcelona. Wolfsbeetle with our luggage inside and my family's borrowed camping gear tied to the roof. All stolen at the beginning of our 3-week vacation, the day we arrived in Spain. The thieves had plenty of time while we were having pizza and sangria in a restaurant nearby. The only things we have left are the clothes on our backs and the money in our pockets. Bridget mourns the loss of her disco outfits and wants to go home to Germany. Wolf hopes to get his car back, and so we're staying. I don't know what makes me sadder, the loss of my clothes or the loss of the tent I'm expected to bring back in perfect condition. After 2 nights staying at a hotel, I'm running out of money. Of the 3 of us, I'm the one still in school. Camping was the only way I could afford this vacation, and the gear was my contribution to our trip. As luck would have it, the police find the Beetle, cleaned out but not damaged. Tent or no tent, with Wolf's help, I convinced Bridget to keep going south. I met Bridget and Wolf a few weeks ago at my favorite club. Bridget approached me in her skinny jeans to put her purse next to me while she danced. Then I noticed Wolf's shock of blonde hair. Tall and thin, he leaned against the wall with a drink dangling in his hand. When he lifted his head to take a sip, his blue eyes lit up. Later that night, I found out Bridget and Wolf grew up together. They are a couple of years older than me, and right away, I longed to be a part of their easygoing friendship. A few weeks later, we set out for Spain. At first, my parents worried about me going on this journey. They thought I was immature for my age. But I convinced them that my companions were decent, responsible people, and so they gave me not only the camping gear, but lots of advice and maps. My friends had never been out of Germany, but I had. I would be the navigator. We drive in the silence on the Autopista de la Mediterránea, the freeway along the coast. Sunburned cattle ranges rise and fall like the swell in the ocean. Now and then, the silhouette of a big black bull stands above the golden grassy ridge. What are these cutouts leaning against scaffolding advertising? Bullfights? Steakhouses? Desperate to lift the mood, I say, look, a bullboard. Wolf focuses on the road, so I turn around to get Bridget's reaction. She's asleep. Each time the coastline dips, the dark blue of the sea appears below the bright sky. I wish we would get off this freeway already. I would take any dirt road to get to the beach. I want to go swimming. But my friends want to go further south, far away from Barcelona.
Thanks, Michaela. Our next reader is Nancy Canyon.
I have 2 poems, and the first one is in 3 parts. In my garden. 1. An impenetrable raspberry hedge, abuzz with passels of bombas, black and orange stripes donning parcels of pollen, redding vines for sweet berries, 75 plus drupelets each. Later blushed with summer sun, I will fill pints with sticky scarlet jam, heavenly come winter when the weather turns cold and gray. 2. Tiny birds fluttered to my garden, gleaning seed from red oak leaf, bolting for the blue. Goldfinches, once known as lettuce birds, alight on swaying stalks, hang sideways and upside down to eat seed packed along purple stems. I gaze in rapt silence, flickering wings, pecking beaks, feeling tickled, the bitter plants have gone to seed. 3. As tall as me, or perhaps taller, Russian kale sways, lush with flowers and hundreds of golden honeybees. I wonder, the 6-foot forest of brassica. I laugh for real. Look at that. It's swarming with bees. Standing close, I watch workers laden with pollen buzz in and out through sprays of yellow flowers. Kitchen table. After school, we sat at the small kitchen table dunking graham crackers in cold milk. My brother and I dunked them long enough to soften, but not so long to turn soggy and fall in the glass. Sorry. In this memory, I don't know why there's a small table in the middle of the kitchen. We had a breakfast nook where we ate cereal and slathered boysenberry jelly on toast, or was it peanut butter? As a child, I didn't like peanut butter and jelly and still don't, so it must have been toast. The best part of this memory is how hard we laughed when my brother insisted we were eating boysenberry jelly. Back to the table in the middle of the kitchen. Perhaps a construction project, a renovation of the breakfast nook, or maybe the table migrated in my memory. I have another memory of my brother and me rolling oranges on that table, working until pulp became juice. We then poked a hole through the rind and sucked down the sweet nectar, massaging the fruit, swallowing every drop. We laughed then too. I can still hear it now. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Our next reader is Sheila Dearden.
Thank you, Laura. This is an excerpt from Finding a Way Home. We slither over seaweed slick rocks with a two-person kayak slung between us to reach the water's edge. Gasping at the cold ache of water on our feet, we clamber into the boat, cinch spray skirts and push away from the shore. We know with a deep animal sense of knowing that we do not choose encounters, the whales do. Out on the water, I carry with me a quiet yearning to be chosen. The day starts like so many others, cool morning air and a sun gleaming like a pearl in the mist. My senses are scrambled in this mercurial world where sea and sky are indiscernible. Needing an anchor point, I stir ripples on the surface to restore water and sky to their rightful place. A warming sun tears the mist to shreds, tints the sea blue-green. The shadowy outline of a harbour seal weaves through the eelgrass beneath our kayaks, then disappears as we head toward deep water and a steeply pitched shoreline fringed with swirling blades of kelp. We round a rocky point just as a curtain of whale breath is drawn across the sea, black blade dorsal fins of orcas cutting toward us some distance ahead. They disappear in unison. We head towards shore to avoid being an unnecessary obstacle, hearts thrumming with excitement, apprehension. Reaching the relative safety of the kelp bed, my husband unhooks his spray skirt and reaches into the cockpit to retrieve his camera from its storage case. I peer over the edge of the kayak, only to see my reflected face distorted into a rippling, ghoulish mask. The sea remains a quiet expanse, interrupted only by the fluting of a distant thrush. Suddenly the surface explodes and a whale slides so close to our kayak we can see the flare of her nostril, bellowing breath from cavernous lungs. Her dorsal fin cuts the water, spindrift streaming over grey saddle patch and raven black back. The kayak sways precariously, as much from our startlement as from the wash of the orca's body. Instinctively, I flex my hand flat palm toward the water, as if I can conjure a firm surface against which to steady myself. Everywhere is noise and streaming water as the sea bursts to 5 more blowholes, explosive orca exhalations and the sound of wild clicking. I glance over my shoulder to see my husband has managed to extricate his camera and is now fumbling to focus as the tip of an adult male's dorsal fin grows out of the water to tower 6 feet above us. 3, 4, 5 more breaths, the whales disappear below the surface, and we rock over whirlpool footprints left in their wake. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. And now our final reader is Victoria Dorper.
I have 2 poems. The first is Orchid. I admire her, my kitchen orchid. I don't actually know if she's a she, though I've always thought of her that way. Not because of her beauty, but rather her toleration for neglect. Her toughness that fights against constraint causes her to upend things, push her roots out into the air when the tiny pot stifles growth below. I am no fit gardener, but she carries on despite the lack of proper care. And while I ignore her, she creates a long stalk abundant with buds. I admire her determination to flower. And the second poem, The Devotion of Apple Blossoms. Infinite faith is required to sense green in the world when all is bare sticks and brown, and a cold wind wreaking havoc with boughs and branches. But that's the job of buds, meditating in their little cells, solemn for a season or two, until sun and warmth loosen chaste sepals, ignite a holy passion of color and fragrance, a tender fluttering as they give themselves away to bees and hummingbirds, wild spring breezes, butterflies, the eyes of passersby, and in final perfect offering, abandoning all else, a gentle swelling into fruit.
Thank you, Victoria. Thanks to all the authors for your wonderful readings. And thank you all for being here to support them. Again, if you haven't already bought the book, Spring and All, there's a link in the chat. And now if you'd like, you can all turn your videos on. You can see each other. Celebrate.
Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful readings today. So good to see you. Audience, I hope you enjoyed them too. And you can find videos from many of our authors here today and others on the Red Wheelbarrow YouTube page. And there's personal interviews for them there. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks everyone for reading.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.